Hello, everyone. I'm Jesse Lynn.
And I'm Angela Lynn. Welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? Today we have another mini for you, and we are talking about polyamory and
Woo.
compersion,
Marvel.
which I don't know if everyone knows what that word is. I certainly didn't until fairly recently. So we found this whole community of people that were really interested in discussing this topic of kind of like untraditional relationship structures, and in that episode, it was specifically about open relationships, but a lot of people were chiming in to the comments talking about polyamory, and someone explicitly said, practice compersion when you were talking about getting jealous of some, trying to manage the
Yes.
jealousy.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to talk about it, because it seems like it's very interesting to all of you as a kind of follow up to that original episode. So, I think to get us started, we should kind of define what these things are, because I'm not going to lie, when the people first entered the comments and they were like blah blah polyamory, I was like, is that the same thing as open relationship? Like, it was very confusing to me. I didn't really know if it was different. So I think consensus is that it is different. They can be related and have a little bit of crossover, but it is different. And kind of, I guess, the like highest level difference is that open relationships are largely within like a primary relationship where the partners are largely looking for sex outside of that primary relationship, whereas polyamory is fundamentally based in the concept of having multiple people in your life that you love and have like emotional attachment to, and obviously sex is like a component of that, but it is like there's no singular primary relationship. It's
Mm.
almost like there's not like a rank order necessarily of partners.
Yeah.
That's what I found.
That makes a ton of sense. And should we define compersion then for the listeners? So I feel like generally speaking, compersion is basically just like this kind of like compassion or love that you have for your partner when you see them enjoying themselves. And that can be with like another person, it could be them doing whatever they like. But basically, you vibe because your partner is having a good time. I'm doing more reading on this. I actually purchased a book called Opening Up. I forgot the author's name, Tristan something. But it's basically another book similar to Ethical Slut that describes different relationship forms and has practices and tips on like how to work on those particular relationships. And it's kind of funny because they do have a lot of like labeling in the book. So like this relationship structure is called this, but basically at the beginning of every single chapter, it's like, we call it this, but like you may or may not feel like your relationship fits into this kind of descriptor. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. This is just like for the purpose of like making it easy for people to understand classification. But like your relationship, like with all open relationships, is probably completely unique, and you have different like rules, you have different methods of coping with challenges, and that's completely fine that it doesn't fit within this structure. For me, I think it's kind of funny because I do fit with what you were described. My partner and I are in an open relationship. He's my primary romantic partner, and like also like for the most part primary sexual partner. And then there are like other people like in our circle that are like attached. But I find it's particularly interesting because I can't say that everybody that is not primary is also just a friend, if that makes sense. So there are like certain people where I'm like, I'm really crushing on them. Like I have this like, it's not a friend thing because I'm like, I don't crush on my friends this way. Like I don't have these feelings for my friends. It's something like in between. It's kind of just like I have more emotions for certain people in my network that I know, and some of them I don't even necessarily like. I've only hooked up with them like once or something, and it's just like the crush is there because we talk a lot and like we have like fun conversation and stuff. I do find that it's funny because there's like elements or aspects of these different concepts in my relationship type, even though it's not like a full multi-romantic partner thing.
Yeah, I guess the thing that's like interesting to me, because I'm not in these like untraditional structures,
Hmm.
is the more I was reading up on these different types of relationships, the more I was like, it's interesting, because we talked about this in the open relationships episode, that like most people who aren't in these structures think of just like it's free for all, and it's
Yeah.
like it's just like do whatever you want. But even with polyamory, because we talk about with open relationships, you guys have like a very
Rules.
specific way of
Yeah.
functioning, and like yeah, you've like set boundaries and explicit like in these situations this is how we will act kind of thing. And in polyamory, I think my idea when I first thought about it was like it sounds more loose to me than open relationships, because it is more like to the idea of having like multiple like quote unquote equal partners, romantic partners, already makes it feel like there isn't necessarily like a rule structure. But from what I read, it is common, but like everyone's different, right? But it's common that you do still have like a certain setup. So like an example they gave was like you have like two primary partners, and maybe they each also have like another partner.
Hmm.
So like that's your group,
Yeah.
and it's not okay for
Like a
you guys
pod.
to bring like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
additional people in. Yeah, it's like agreed that like this is the like mutual love kind of zone, and then like outside of that is like you have to talk about it. It's not like a given that you just like bring whoever in.
The way that I think about it is like I can't imagine any kind of structure, like any kind of relationship object like this without any kind of structure. So I would imagine if you have multiple romantic partners, maybe you don't have the exact same agreement with each one, but there is an agreement with each person. And maybe two of your romantic partners have an agreement with each other because they want to see each other, or they just have an agreement to like manage their time with you. But for sure, I can't see it being successful without that kind of discussion, because honestly, like when it comes down to it, I feel like probably the biggest limiter of having multiple romantic partners is time. Like you only have so much time in the week. You still want to hang out with your friends. Like it's not really possible to foster like a really deep relationship with that many people. You only have so many hours of the day. The whole idea of polyamory and even open relationships kind of like scared me at first, because I was like, how am I going to manage like my feelings around this? And like, it just seems like really complicated. And even once I learned about like there were detailed structures to the relationship, and it's like a very choiceful thing that you discuss with your partner, I was like, this sounds really complicated. Like multiple conversations, like you have to check in with people, like. But honestly, at the end of the day, I found that it actually reduces complexity, because you're really upfront with what you want and whether or not you're satisfied. So I feel like a lot of the times there's this like shame that you take in within yourself when you're not happy in the relationship, because you're like, what am I doing that's wrong where this isn't working? Or you reflect that back to your partner where you're like, what is that person doing wrong that is. But I think that once you remove that and you're really clear with what you want, it becomes less of like a good and a bad conversation, and it's more just about, can this person give you what you want? Like, your needs. Is that person going to bring that to the table? And if they can't, that's fine. That doesn't mean they're a shitty person. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean like you can't have some kind of relationship with them. It just means that they can't meet you where you need them to meet you for your relationship to be at a certain level. And when I describe it like that, logically, I'm like, this sounds great. Obviously, there's still like, as you kind of work through different challenges, and when you're having a bad week and your emotions are whack, like you still feel really whack sometimes, because logical things don't necessarily help you process emotions correctly. But I do feel like this relationship structure makes the most sense. And even a lot of the like Ethical Slut and this opening up book, they talk about how like some people come in, they do the exploration, and they're like, no, monogamy is for me. Like, this is my choice, which is also like completely valid. Like you've done the work, you looked at where your strong suits are, like what things will make you happy, and you made a choice. And I think that that's kind of the most important thing that underpins like all of these things, is that they're just very choiceful examination of your relationship, and deep understanding of your needs, like what makes you upset, what makes you tick, what makes you happy, and like bringing everything to the table so that it's like a really open conversation about what everybody wants, everybody needs, and to try to make everybody satisfied in that kind of situation.
Yeah, what I loved about our discussion last time around open relationships was that it just felt like open communication was kind of like
Absolutely.
the underlying like foundation that was required to make something like this work. So for me, thinking about like would this kind of thing work for me? I mean, there's many factors why any given person or couple would consider or not consider this kind of stuff, but for me, I think the bare minimum stuff would be like you have to be committed to having really open and honest communication, and you have to have a lot of trust in
Yeah.
your partner.
Yeah.
Because like going back to the idea of compersion, right? Which is like it's funny because I was like, is this a made up word? Like I
Yeah.
like never heard this word. And actually it was made, I mean, all words were made up at some point, but like it was made up in the 90s apparently by a polyamory group based in San Francisco. So but yeah, it's difficult for me to kind of like wrap my head around this concept of like other ways that people describe compersion is the opposite of jealousy, which is like easier said than done,
Yeah.
but like essentially trying to like minimize the jealousy and convert that more into like mutual like love and support for your partner when they are
Yeah.
enjoying themselves, whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just like that idea, especially when it comes to like polyamory, is like I personally can't do it because like I think it actually is like I read a study that like women in particular are like more um challenged with the idea
Mm.
of their partner emotionally straying from them than
Mm.
sexually straying from them. Like most women would rather have them have a one night stand than to say I've fallen in love with somebody else
Mm.
because it's like a much deeper cut. So I personally don't think I could like ever deal with the idea of polyamory because
Okay.
it's like I have to accept that I'm not the only person that
Mm.
my husband loves and like feel good about it and feel like supportive about it and like be friends with that person. It just like that idea is like very difficult for me to wrap my head around.
It's honestly, it's not an easy thing, and you kind of, for me, you kind of just work through it. But I also, I can see the evolution. Like there are moments where, for example, we went out recently, and John was like really interested in this guy that had recently moved to the city, and I was like, you should go talk to him. I think that will be really cute, like a really cute and fun moment for you, and also like potentially for us if anything like triangle ever happens. So I was like, go for it. Like that's sounds fun. But I also think like I don't know, sometimes like you talk about Ramon, like how much like awesomeness he's like added to your life. Like would it make you happy if someone was able to add that same level of awesomeness to his life? But it doesn't change anything
Are
about your
you saying that
relationship.
I don't
No,
add
no, you
that level?
do. You do,
It's
but
just
someone else can add like a different flavor of awesomeness.
personally, no.
Okay.
That's a
That's
no for
fair.
me, dog. And that's why it's everyone's kind of like choice on
Yeah.
these things. Because also, this is something we talked about in the open relationships
Mm.
episode. I think a lot of the other kind of like foundational element for making this work is either like you love your partner so much that you're like, I just like anything that makes you happy will make me happy. So even if I don't partake in finding other partners, I'm happy for you to be like exploring.
Mm.
I think that is the minority of
Yeah.
cases.
That's like a
It's
very
mostly, yeah, it's that's like ultimate compersion,
yeah.
right? Because that's like literally you're just doing it because you like love this other person
Hmm.
versus a lot of times it is that both partners seek kind of like equal or relatively equal like they want that opportunity to seek other partners to fulfill needs that they want filled. And for me personally, and I think for other people who are like, oh, I couldn't do this kind of structure, it's like if you don't both want it, like it just doesn't feel fair and it doesn't feel like it's worth it because it's like, okay, I love you, but to make you like incrementally happier, I don't get anything in return, and I have the threat of potentially losing you if you fall in love with somebody else that you bring in, is like how I view it. Because I'm not the one who's like interested in
A certain
pursuing
thing.
outside things. So then it's like, what's in it for me? Like, that's kind of the challenge, I think, for a lot of more like traditionally monogamous type thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there isn't anything in it for you. Like, it's not, the value exchange is not a specific thing that the person wants to do. The value exchange is freedom. So it's like your partner has freedom to do what he wants with, your partner has the freedom to do something that he wants that you don't want to explore with him. But the same thing is true. You also get the freedom from your partner to explore something that he is not particularly interested in doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, I have a lot of respect for the way that you laid out the way that your relationships works in the open relationships episode, because like I said, it sounds like it's a lot of work, honestly, to like be really self-aware and to like be vulnerable to express like your exact needs and like your boundaries and like set up these rules. So I have a lot of respect for that kind of like effort to maintain this type of structure. But because that is so much effort, I'm like, why would I put in that much effort if I'm the one who's getting nothing out of this? It's like you're gonna get to play and I get nothing, but to like know that you're incrementally happier. I don't know.
I think that's a fair thing to that's a fair thing to say, and that could be one of those reasons why some people choose monogamy, because they're like, I don't have a reason to go outside of the relationship. Like, I'm fully satisfied with my partner, and that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all of you listening, we would love to hear from you, hear what you think about this mini conversation. If you yourself are in an untraditional relationship structure, the practices that you also employ to help make your relationship work, or if you're happily in a monogamous relationship, we would also love to hear what things you do to keep things going.
Yeah, so drop us a comment wherever you're watching this currently so that we can start up an engaging conversation on the topic, and come back next week because we'll have another fresh episode for you then. And until then,
再见
zaijian, bitches.
bitches